Many PAs and NPs are interested in becoming an MSL, but do you really know what an MSL does? Do you know what makes you a good candidate? If PAs and NPs make good MSLs, how much travel you're going to have to do, and what the job really entails and the amount of hours it entails. If that's you and you're interested in MSL, but you want to learn more about the actual position, then stay tuned to this video because I'm going to be talking to a PA who has been in the MSL world for over 20 years, working as an MSL, but also moving up in the company and overseeing MSLs, doing the hiring and training of them. So he really has a lot to share with you about the role.
I'm Bob McKenna. I've been a PA since 1981. Currently, I'm an assistant professor at Marshall V. Ketchum University, but most of my career was spent in biopharmaceutical medical affairs.
What makes you an authority to speak about being an MSL as a PA or NP?
I've been an MSL for about 10 years, and about 20 years I've been a manager of MSLs.
Why don't we just start with what an MSL really is?
Well, every company uses MSLs slightly differently than every other company. So the specifics will vary greatly from company to company, depending on what the mission is and what it is they want the MSLs to accomplish. But generally speaking, the idea of what an MSL is captured in the title itself. It's basically we're a liaison. So we act as liaisons between thought leaders, academic leaders, writers, thinkers, thought leaders, and the company. So the main purpose of an MSL is to interact with those who are leaders in whatever therapeutic field that the MSL happens to be working in the home office. And what that does is it helps the company design research studies that are connected to reality, helps us understand who is driving the thinking in a particular field. It helps companies understand just how medicine is being implemented outside of the company itself.
Do you think that PAs and NPs make really good MSLs? And if so, why? Or do you think that they're not the right fit?
No, I think PAs and NPs, anybody with clinical experience makes excellent MSL, because most of the people that MSLs deal with are MDs, a few DOs, rarely PAs, because unfortunately there's just not that many PAs in therapeutic leadership positions. Because most thought leaders, at least at one point, dealt with patients on a day-to-day basis, PAs have built-in empathy for what a thought leader goes through. So particularly if you've got a clinically active thought leader, somebody who is still seeing patients, they might be in clinic 1 or 2, 3 days a week, and then in the research labs the rest of the time, or doing all their therapeutically political stuff for their society. So as they're representing the science or engaging in scientific discussions, they can do so in a way that resonates with the thought leader, because they understand what the thought leader is dealing with as well from just a day-to-day basis. So yes, I think PAs and NPs in particular have the potential to make superb MSLs.
And do you feel like that pharmaceutical companies are realizing this, and that the opportunities for PAs and NPs as MSLs is going to continue to grow? Or do you think we'll still always be just a small portion of MSLs?
Oh, they are growing. The number of PAs who are now showing up in MSL type jobs or clinical liaison jobs is growing quite a bit. So it depends on the companies. I've also noticed another interesting phenomenon. When I started, what a person's training was really wasn't that important. In other words, a lot of MSLs just had a bachelor's degree. A lot of MSLs were former sales reps who had an interest in science. Over the years, that has evolved to where now probably most companies require a doctoral level degree to even be considered for an MSL, but with one exception, and those are PAs and NPs with master's level training. And more companies are recognizing this training to be equivalent to doctoral level training.
And so let's dive into the other thing that I often see out there is people say that you have to be an expert in a certain area of medicine in order to become an MSL. I am a a diabetes expert. This is what I've focused my career path on and stuff. Is that true?
No, no, it's not. PAs are trained as generalists, and we know medicine broadly and generally, and we have the ability to dive deep as needed. And when I started, way back when, that's what I thought. So I was working in an urgent care clinic, and I knew all about management of acute diseases, how to treat UTIs and how to deal with, minor trauma, that kind of thing. So when I first started looking for jobs, I was looking for companies that sold outpatient antibiotics, for example, or companies with pain relievers, that kind of thing. The first job I got hired for was in cardiorenal disease, which I had never really worked in. But I found that, okay, there's a training period. The MSLs go through training. When I went through the training, I know all this stuff. And I know how to read a paper, and I know how to find information. The easy part is learning the science of the disease, because PAs already understand anatomy, we already understand physiology, we already understand what happens in the clinic, we already understand just the gestalt of managing patients. It's no different than a PA who's in family practice who goes to emergency medicine, or goes from emergency medicine to an endocrinology practice. Yeah, there's a learning curve at the beginning where you have to learn the ropes. Well, it's no different with MSLs.
What skills or traits make somebody a good candidate to be an MSL?
As a hiring manager, I probably hired, I don't know, maybe 100 or more MSLs in my career. And I've made mistakes and learned from those mistakes. And over time, I came to appreciate there's 3 traits that I look for in an MSL candidate. Number 1 is a passion for the science. So when I'm looking for an MSL candidate, I'm looking for somebody who loves the science, somebody who reads the scientific literature the way a sports fan reads the sports page. So somebody's got to love the science. If you don't love the science, don't be an MSL. Number 2 is emotional intelligence, the ability to listen and the ability to interact with people of where they're coming from. Just that ability to have empathy. So any clinician who is able to really connect with their patients already has that training. So interacting with thought leaders is really no different than getting a history from a patient in a lot of cases, in terms of open-ended questions and all that kind of thing. And then the 3rd trait is a passion for the job itself, because the job is not for everyone. Most of these jobs are travel jobs. Spend a lot of time on the road because the geographies that are covered usually are very large. The smallest assignment I ever had was 2 states, Oregon and Washington. The largest job I ever had was 3/4 of the United States.
Is the MSL, are they identifying who these key leaders are? Are they the ones figuring out who that is and how to get in touch with them, or does that happen? Does somebody else schedule that, and then as the MSL, you're just going and actually doing the meetings?
Well, it's actually both. So it depends on the maturity of the therapeutic area. It depends on the maturity of the drug. It also depends on if it's a new drug in a new field. So for example, when the first bisphosphonates came out to treat osteoporosis, nobody had ever treated osteoporosis before. Who were the thought leaders? How did we figure them out? So there's a couple of ways that gets figured out. There are some companies and external vendors that will do what are called bibliometric searches to identify who thought leaders are. And that's basically go into the literature and just see who's citing who in the relevant literature and whose name rises to the top, who are the most dominant people. And then they'll do things like look at, okay, who are the heads of the societies, who are the journal editors, that sort of thing. And then the MSLs ourselves, we go out and do that. We'll find one expert and we'll ask them, so who do you look up to? Who do you interact with? Is there anybody else you're aware of who might be interested in meeting with me? And I personally have found a number of unrecognized thought leaders that way. It becomes very interesting with PAs and NPs because in most databases, PAs and NPs are not listed by specialty. Or in other words, their specialty is listed as PA or NP. So an endocrinology PA specialty is listed as PA. An orthopedic surgery PA is listed as PA. So if you're trying to find some database that lists specialties, you're not going to find many PAs or NPs. The MSL's got to go out and just do a little detective work to find them.
Going back to the travel, I know it depends on how big your territory, your region is, but in general, normally Do they work from home and then just go travel? Are they in an office and then just occasionally travel? Or is it so much travel that they don't even have an office?
Yeah, most of the time, MSLs work from home. It's a field-based position. So I live in Southern California, and I've lived here for 20 years. And the companies I've worked for have all been headquartered in the Northeast, either in the Philadelphia area or Boston area. So my boss has always been 3 time zones east of me, which makes teleconferencing and web meetings challenging. And so I work out of my home. So behind me, this is my home office that I'm in now, which I've worked out of for the last 20 years. But most MSLs work from home, and their boss might not be at the home office either. So I was a director of MSLs based in the Los Angeles area, and then my boss would be back in somewhere in the Boston area, for example. So I would meet with my boss either like we're doing now electronically, or periodically I'd fly back to the home office, go back for a multi-day meeting. And so the last group I was on, there were 3 directors that managed the entire company, the entire geography of the United States. And so we would go fly back to the home office. And every now and then we'd have an internal company meeting where we'd bring all the MSLs in for training or to meet with our scientists or something like that. But no, we're headquartered. Most MSLs work out of their homes. If an MSL is fortunate enough to actually live in the city where the company is headquartered, then yes, they'll pop into the office quite a bit. But I'm not aware of any MSL who had their own office at a company headquarters. It's always been in their home.
If you're looking to be an MSL, are you traveling twice a month, or in general, twice a month? Are you traveling like 2 or 3 times a week?
I'll tell you the way I did it. I just to save my own sanity, I would travel once a week. I'll just do one city a week, or one metropolitan area. So, for example, I might fly to Birmingham, Alabama, spend a couple days there, do what I need to do there, then go back home to Tampa and do the rest of it on the phone or in the office. Or if I went to Southern California, I might spend, before I lived here, I would spend, maybe 3 days here seeing all the people that I need to see. The frequency with which an MSL sees thought leaders really depends on the nature of their interaction. It's got to be valuable to the thought leader.
How is the MSL evaluated generally about how effective they are? Because I assume with like a pharmaceutical rep, it's pretty easy.
Sales.
It can match dollar sales too. But
Right.
How are MSLs kind of evaluated?
So measuring activity or measuring effectiveness, that's an ongoing challenge within the MSL world. But the way something all companies do is they at least measure activity. How many times did you do certain things? So say you're assigned 50 people. Did you meet with all 50 people at least 3 times over a year?
So one of the interesting things you had mentioned earlier, you said, pharmaceuticals are used all over the world. Do MSLs have the potential, like do American MSLs have the potential to work overseas at all?
Yeah, if they want, but it's all different because there's different rules. So it depends on what part of the world you're going to. But yes, that is possible.
So there are, and you don't have to necessarily go into them, but there are potentially other opportunities if a PA or an NP moves into being an MSL. Once they're an MSL for a while, there are other opportunities usually that they can move up into companies.
Oh, yeah. I've known MSLs to become leaders in pharmaceutical companies. Matter of fact, my wife works for a company now. She's about to retire from it, but she works for a company now where the director of medical affairs was an MSL I trained 20 years ago. And he's running his own thing. And he reports to somebody who was also an MSL once upon a time in their career. And they're in a vice president level role, one step below the CEO role. So yeah, there's a career path if one is interested in that kind of thing.
So if somebody's watching this and they are a PA or an NP and they would like to look into or move into becoming an MSL, what kind of advice would you give them to help them become a good candidate? Any resources or courses or anything like that might help them?
Yeah. Find out as much as you can about what an MSL is, number one, because if you don't know what the job is, when you go to an interview, that will become pretty obvious. And I know me as a hiring manager, if I'm interviewing somebody who really was fuzzy on what the concept was, that's the end of the interview. Because what happens is somebody might think, oh, what an easy job. You just stay home and read papers and talk to people on the phone every now and then. It's hard work. I mean, it's fun. I found it fun, but it's long days, lots of travel. Because you work from home, 5 o'clock comes around and you still got work to do. You're still doing it. I routinely work 60-hour weeks as an MSL. And I had to impose some self-discipline to get that down to 50 hours a week. But it's the kind of job that never ends. So if somebody's interested in becoming an MSL, if you know MSLs or are called on by an MSL, then talk to them. If you're not, if you are fortunate enough to work in an area where maybe somebody in your therapeutic circle is considered a thought leader and is being called on by an MSL, talk to them. If not, talk to the drug reps. That's how I got into it. But yeah, interact with people in the industry. There's also the Medical Science Liaison Society. There's a website, and there's a lot of resources there. Google, look it up. Look up MSLs. You're going to find there's a lot more information about what MSLs are now, medical science liaisons. They're also called a lot of different things. But if you're interested in getting hired, it's like getting hired for anything else. Do as much homework as you can to find out who the players are, to find out what kind of field you want. Sometimes you might want to target a certain company. Build up your LinkedIn network. That's a real good way. I mean, I get job offers almost daily now. So where are you going to find MSLs? Or at scientific meetings, at grand rounds, at morning report, if you're in an academic center, or wherever scientists or thought leaders meet to exchange ideas. You are likely to find an MSL in that area there, and just put yourself out there.
Okay, anything else about being an MSL that you think people should know or that I didn't ask you about?
Well, one thing you didn't ask me about is pay.
Oh, yeah, that's important.
Some people go, well, is it worth it? Well, that depends. Each of us has our own internal value system. So the financial rewards of being an MSL are big relative to being a PA. On average, I made roughly double what an average PA, double to 3 times what a PA made in my career. And that's not a boast, that's just reality. And I wasn't the highest paid by any means. The other benefit of working for a corporation is all the benefits that come from working at a corporation. Excellent health benefits, retirement plans. I even had a pension. There's not many of those around anymore, but there's some of those. All the ancillary expenses that you might be paying out of pocket now, like your dues for your pants or membership registration for professional meetings, CME, that's all paid for. I usually met my CME requirements within 6 months because of all the meetings I would go to
Right.
the 2-year reporting to keep your C. I was usually there, usually within 6 months.
Yeah, I guess I never really thought about, in addition to the higher salary, just the amount of knowledge you're going to be acquiring and what that would do for you personally and professionally to have all of that information, incorporated.
Actually, the most rewarding part of being an MSL has been my being in the room when it happened in terms of science, of being there when the revolutionary new results were revealed at a meeting and having discussions with the thought leader before those results and me knowing this was coming, and then seeing it in the newspaper the next day. This new study says, that was pretty cool. And being on a conversational basis with these pillars of the field, being on a first name basis, having leaders in your field, them having you in their speed dial. That's kind of an ego rush.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. Yeah, I thought about that earlier. Just your network must be incredible.
There was at one point in my career, I was meeting with this internist in Oregon who was a leader in this particular field. And I went in one day and he showed me a paper that I hadn't read yet. And he goes, I gotcha. I finally found something you didn't already know about. And that's when I knew that, I got it.
He respected you. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
he was proud of himself that he was able to stump me, and at that time I didn't have my master's degree yet.
Oh,
I
well.
was a bachelor's level trained PA.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Bob, for sharing this amazing information and all that you've learned through the years as working in the MSL community. So thanks again for joining us.
Happy to help. I'm happy to see that there are more and more PAs and NPs showing up in the MSL world. So anything I can do to help encourage that. Again, it's not for everybody. Most people who become PAs and NPs do it because they want to be clinicians, and rightly so. I mean, that's important. But for some, after a while, they make a decision that, I'd like to do something different. I'd like to move beyond the clinic, and this is, or move somewhere else instead of the clinic. And this is one alternative that worked out really well for me.
I'm so happy that I did this interview with Bob. I knew what an MSL was before. I have a video where I interviewed somebody who went from being a PA to an MSL, but I don't think I really understood the job as well as I do now after this interview. He has really given us some great information. I love the fact that he kind of busts some of those myths that you have to be an expert or that you have to have a doctorate degree as a PA or an NP in order to become an MSL. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope that you've learned a lot and that you've got some direction in moving forward. And if you're interested and want to learn more and want to hear the story of the PA that I interviewed who became an MSL, you can watch that video here. Thanks for joining me today. Take care, stay sane, and I'll see you next time on the Medicine Couch. Bye.